"Come on, Maddie girl. We've got lemonade to sell," Victor Jameson said, setting up the folding table on the sunlit corner of Maple and 3rd, the same spot they'd claimed every Saturday for the last 6 weeks. His 5-year-old daughter, Madeline, stood beside him in her faded overalls and sparkly pink sneakers, proudly holding up a hand-drawn sign that read, "Fresh lemonade, $1." Victor adjusted the lid on the cooler, brushing a bead of sweat off his brow. Summer in Houston was no joke, and the air was already heavy with heat. His white T-shirt clung to his back and his jeans were worn at the knees. But it didn't matter. This was all for Maddie, for her smile, for her future. He'd lost his job at the auto shop 4 months ago when the place shut down overnight. Since then, he'd been scraping by odd jobs, a little freelance mechanic work, and now this lemonade stand. It wasn't much, but it was something they did together. Maddie loved it, and Victor loved seeing her happy. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging on his hand. "Can I pour the next cup?" "You bet," he said, giving her a wink. "But remember, we've got to charm our customers." As if on cue, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. It didn't belong here. Not on this dusty, quiet street. The engine purred as the driver stepped out, heels clicking against the pavement. Victor glanced up, and for a second, he swore time paused. A woman in a cream-colored blouse tucked into tailored navy trousers walked toward them, her dark hair pulled into a low bun, sunglasses perched on her nose. The way she carried herself, confident, graceful, sure made it clear she didn't belong in this part of town. "Are you open?" she asked. Victor blinked. Yes, we are. Welcome to Maddie's Lemonade." "I'm Maddie," his daughter chimed in, beaming up at the woman. The woman lowered her sunglasses, revealing striking green eyes. She smiled. "Hi, Maddie." "I'd love a cup, please." Maddie carefully poured the lemonade into a paper cup and handed it over with both hands. $1. The woman reached into her bag, pulled out a crisp 20 and handed it to Victor. "Keep the change." Victor's brows lifted. That's too much." "I insist," she said, taking a sip. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise. "This is actually really good." Maddie clapped her hands. "Told you," Victor chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "We use real lemons." "No powder mix." The woman nodded, eyes flicking back to Victor with something unreadable behind them. "I'm Elise Saunders," she said, holding out her hand. "Victor, and this little boss here is Maddie." Elise knelt down to Maddie's level. "You're a great businesswoman," Maddie giggled. "Daddy says I'm the CEO of the stand," Elise straightened. "That makes 2 of us." Victor tilted his head. "You're a CEO," she gave a modest shrug, "of Saunders Tech." Victor blinked. "Wait, the software company, that's the one." He let out a low whistle. "Wow. What brings you out here?" "I had a meeting nearby, saw your sign, and got curious. I used to sell lemonade when I was a kid too." Before Victor could respond, Maddie tugged on Elise's sleeve. "Want to sit with us while you drink it?" Elise looked down at her, surprised. "I'd like that." Victor pulled over a folding chair. Elise sat, crossing her legs, and for the next 10 minutes they talked, about lemonade, about childhood summers, about Maddie's dream of opening her own bakery someday. Then Elise stood. "I should go," she said, "but thank you for the lemonade." "And the company?" Victor nodded. "Anytime." As she walked back to her car, Maddie whispered, "She's really pretty, isn't she, Daddy?" Victor smiled. "Yeah, she is." The next Saturday, she came back, this time without the suit, jeans and a simple blouse, hair down, sunglasses still on. "Back for more lemonade," Victor teased. "Back for the company," Elise replied, her smile soft. Maddie rushed over, holding out a fresh cup. "You're our first customer today." Elise knelt to accept it. "Lucky me." They talked again, this time longer. Elise stayed nearly an hour. She asked Victor about his car work, about Maddie's favorite color, and about their favorite things to do together. When they were alone for a minute, Victor asked, "You sure you don't have somewhere more important to be?" She looked at him, expression serious. "I spend most of my time in boardrooms and behind glass. This feels more real." Victor didn't know what to say to that. By the 3rd week, she brought pastries, a whole box of them. "For the CEO of Maddie's Lemonade," she said with a wink at the little girl. Victor noticed how easily Elise laughed now, how her shoulders relaxed, how she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention, and he couldn't lie to himself, he was looking at her too. They started talking after the stand closed. sitting on the curb with lemonade in hand, Maddie chasing butterflies nearby. "You know," Victor said one afternoon, "you're not what I expected." Elise raised a brow. "What you expect? Cold, distant, corporate," she laughed. "I used to be. Until I realized work isn't everything." "What changed?" She hesitated, then said, "My dad passed. 2 years ago, he was always working. We barely talked. I didn't want to end up like that." Victor nodded slowly, understanding more than she knew. "I admire what you're doing," Elise added. "Raising your daughter like this, being present." "She deserves everything," Victor said, his voice low, "even if all I can give her is lemonade. You're giving her more than that." Their eyes met. Something shifted. By the 5th week, Victor looked forward to Saturdays in a way he hadn't looked forward to anything in years. Elise came every time. Sometimes she helped pour lemonade. Sometimes she just sat and talked. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Victor caught her watching Maddie with soft eyes. "You'd make a great mom," he said without thinking. Elise turned to him, surprised. Sorry, that was probably too much." "No," she said, voice steady. "It wasn't." He looked at her, really looked at her. "Elise," he said quietly, "I don't have much to offer. I'm just a guy with a kid and a cooler of lemonade." She stepped closer, her voice low. "You've got more heart than half the men I know with yachts and bank accounts." Victor hesitated. "I'm scared." "So am I," she whispered. "But I haven't felt this alive in years." Then she pressed a kiss to his cheek. Maddie giggled behind them. "You, adults kissing," they both laughed, but Victor's heart pounded. Something real was happening, and he wasn't about to lose it. The first time Elise invited Victor and Maddie to the botanical gardens, he hesitated. Not because he didn't want to go, he did, but because it felt like stepping into a world that didn't belong to him. A world of glossy invitations and linen napkins, where little girls wore white sandals instead of light-up sneakers and fathers weren't worried about gas money on the way home. But Maddie's eyes lit up when Elise handed her the folded brochure. "There's a butterfly dome," she gasped, pointing at the picture. Victor glanced at Elise. "Are you sure?" She met his gaze without flinching. "I already bought the tickets. Maddie deserves to see it." And so they went. The parking lot was lined with luxury sedans and sleek hybrids, but Elise didn't comment when Victor's pickup creaked into a spot at the far end. She waited for them at the entrance in a pale blue top and simple flats, holding 2 bottles of water. "Ready for an adventure?" she asked as Maddie barreled into her for a hug. Victor walked beside her as they followed the winding garden path. Every turn held something new: towering orchids, koi ponds, shaded groves with benches carved into stone. Elise kept pace with Maddie, pointing out the names of flowers, answering every question with patience and wonder. "You know all this stuff?" Victor asked when Maddie ran ahead to chase a dragonfly. "My mother was a florist," Elise said, brushing a leaf from her arm. "She used to bring home clippings and quiz me." It was the first time she'd mentioned her mother. Victor nodded, letting the silence stretch. "She passed away when I was in college," Elise added. "I couldn't afford to fly home for the funeral. I was interning in New York, and I thought if I missed one day, I'd lose the job." Victor didn't ask if she regretted it. He could see the answer in the way her hand tightened around the water bottle. Maddie darted back to them, tugging Victor's hand. "There's a maze. Can we go?" Elise smiled. "I'll race you." Victor watched as the two of them disappeared into the green hedges, laughter echoing, and for a moment he didn't feel out of place. He felt lucky. Later, they sat on a bench under a canopy of vines, sharing ice cream cones. Elise had a smear of chocolate near the corner of her mouth, and Victor reached for a napkin to wipe it before he thought twice. She caught his wrist. "Let me guess, chocolate fudge swirl for Maddie, but plain vanilla for you." "Guilty," he said, chuckling. "I don't get fancy with dessert." Elise leaned back. "You know, I've been to Monaco for a tech summit, had gelato on a yacht, but this is better." Victor raised a brow. "A yacht," she gave a small shrug. "It was rented," he laughed. "Of course it was." She tilted her head. "Why are you always surprised when I say stuff like that?" "Because I don't meet many people who can say Monaco and yacht in the same sentence without blinking." "Well," she said, licking her cone, "maybe you should get used to it." He looked at her, searching her face. "Why are you doing all this?" Her expression softened. "Because I want to." That's not an answer. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I've spent years building something that makes money but not meaning. You and Maddie. You remind me there's more than boardrooms and balance sheets. Victor didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. On the way out, Elise bought Maddie a pressed flower bookmark from the gift shop. For your storybooks, she said. Maddie beamed. Can you come to story night? Victor hesitated, but Elise was already kneeling beside her. I'd love to, she said seriously. But only if your dad says it's okay. He met her eyes. Yeah. It's okay. That night, Elise sat cross-legged on their worn rug, reading from a fairy tale book while Maddie curled up next to her. Victor made tea in the kitchen, watching from the doorway. After Maddie fell asleep, clutching the flower bookmark like it was treasure, Victor walked Elise to her car. You didn't have to do all that, he said. I know, she replied, unlocking the door, but I wanted to. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. You're not used to being told no, are you? She tilted her head. Does it show? He gave a quiet laugh. You walk through the world like it belongs to you. I've had to, she said, more seriously than he expected. There was something raw in her voice, something earned. Victor looked down. I don't know how to fit into your world. I'm not asking you to. He looked up. I just want to be in yours, she said. He stepped closer, heart thudding. This thing between us, it's moving fast. It is, she agreed, but it doesn't feel wrong. No, he admitted. It doesn't. I should go, she said, voice low. He nodded, stepping back. But before she could open the door, she turned, standing on her toes to press a kiss to his jaw, barely a whisper of contact, but it left heat blooming across his skin. Good night, Victor. He watched her drive off, headlights fading into the quiet street. When he turned back to the house, Maddie was at the window, grinning sleepily. Are you gonna marry her? She asked. He laughed, shaking his head. Go to bed. But the question sat with him long after she drifted off. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. He felt like he might be falling. Victor stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have a stain on it. Maddie sat on the edge of the bed, swinging her legs and watching him closely. Do you think she'll like it? He asked, glancing at her reflection. She already likes you, Maddie said, matter of fact. Even when you wear your gross mechanic shirt, he laughed. Not exactly the confidence boost I was hoping for. Tonight was definitely not lemonade stand territory. Elise had invited them to a fundraising gala her company was hosting at the Downtown Art Institute. A formal event with catered food, string quartets, and guests who probably spent more on their shoes than Victor spent on groceries in a month, but Elise had insisted. Come as you are, she'd said. I want you there. Both of you? So here he was, trying to tame his hair with water and borrowed gel from the neighbor kid next door, while Maddie wore a simple navy dress Elise had quietly sent over earlier with a note that read, A little something for your CEO. Victor hadn't known whether to be grateful or embarrassed. Probably both. When they arrived at the Art Institute, Victor's boots landed with a dull thud against the polished marble steps. A valet offered to take the truck, but Victor shook his head. He parked it himself around the corner. Inside, the gallery shimmered with soft lighting reflecting off glass sculptures and modern canvases. Guests in black tie attire mingled with champagne flutes and hushed laughter. Victor felt like a worn page in a glossy magazine. But Maddie clutched his hand tightly, her eyes wide with wonder, and that grounded him. Elise said she'd meet us near the center exhibit, he whispered to Maddie. They made their way through the room, past towering arrangements of white orchids and waiters balancing silver trays. Then he saw her. Elise stood beneath a suspended sculpture of hand-blown glass that looked like frozen fire. Her dress was a deep indigo, simple but elegant, her hair in soft waves over one shoulder. She wasn't wearing a single piece of jewelry. She didn't need to. When she turned and saw them, her entire face lit up, not the polite smile she gave to guests and donors, but something softer, warmer, just for them. You made it, she said, stepping forward. We couldn't let your party go without the lemonade crew, Victor said, trying to sound casual. Maddie let go of his hand and ran into Elise's arms. You look like a princess, Maddie whispered. And you look like a star, Elise replied. I've been waiting for you to get here. Victor watched the way she knelt to eye level, completely unbothered by the stares around the room. She didn't care who was watching. That meant something. A man approached them, older in a tailored tuxedo with a glass of scotch in hand. "Elise," he said, "the Andersons are asking about the new expansion. Should I let them know you'll join us shortly?" "I'll be there in a few minutes," she said smoothly. "Thanks, Charles." The man nodded, then glanced at Victor for half a second too long before walking away. Victor shifted his weight. "I don't want to get in your way tonight." "You're not," Elise said, leveling her gaze at him. "You're why I'm here." She offered her hand. He took it, and she led him and Maddie to a quieter part of the gallery, past a velvet rope into a small alcove filled with oil paintings. "This is my favorite room," she said, her voice lowering. "No one comes in here after the speeches start." Victor glanced around. "It's quieter. It's real," she said. "Just paint and canvas and silence, no fundraising goals, no headlines." He hesitated. "You ever think about walking away from all this?" She folded her arms. "Sometimes. But then I think about what I built. It's not the money, Victor, it's the control. I spent years being the only woman in rooms full of men who thought I was just a name on a resume. I fought for every inch of ground. You've earned it," he said. "Maybe, but lately I wonder if I'm missing something else." He looked down at Maddie, who was peering at a portrait of a woman with a yellow scarf. "You have everything," he said. "And I've got a beat-up truck and a kid who thinks peanut butter is gourmet. That's not all you have." Her voice was quiet now. "You have purpose, you have love." Victor's throat tightened. "You don't have to say that." "I'm not saying it to be kind," Elise said. "I'm saying it because I've had 1,000 conversations in rooms like this, and not one of them has mattered as much as the ones I've had with you." He looked at her, and for the first time since they met, he didn't feel like he was standing on the outside of something. He felt seen. Just then, Maddie tugged on his sleeve. "Can I tell you a secret?" Victor leaned down. "Always. I think Elise is even cooler than superheroes." He smiled. "I think you might be right." Elise crouched next to Maddie. "I have a secret too." "What is it?" Maddie whispered. "I'm scared of pigeons." Maddie burst into laughter. "But you're not scared of anything?" "I'm terrified of pigeons," Elise said solemnly. "Don't tell anyone." Victor laughed, and it echoed off the tall walls. He hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Later, as the speeches began and the music resumed, Elise squeezed Victor's arm. "I'll be back in 10 minutes, she said. "Don't go anywhere." Victor nodded, watching her walk back into the swirl of high society and polished conversation, but her shoulders were squared, her head high. She didn't look like she was performing. She looked like a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and who she planned to come back to. Maddie leaned against his side, yawning. "Daddy." "Yeah. Are we going to see her again tomorrow?" He looked down at his daughter, her face soft with sleep. "Yeah, kiddo," he said. "I think we will." Victor stepped into the Saunders Tech headquarters lobby, his boots silent against the polished marble floor. He held Maddie's hand tightly as he scanned the space, towering glass walls, minimalist sculptures, and a reception desk that looked more like an art installation than something meant to hold pens or paper. The receptionist greeted them with a warm smile. "You must be Victor and Madeline, miss. Saunders is waiting for you on the top floor." Victor cleared his throat and nodded. "Thanks." An assistant escorted them to the private elevator. Maddie's eyes darted excitedly around the mirrored interior as they ascended. "Do you think there's a swimming pool up here?" she whispered. Victor squeezed her hand. "I think there's something even better." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing an open atrium flooded with natural light. Elise stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the skyline, her back straight, arms at her sides. But when she turned, the formal lines of the office disappeared from her face. She smiled, not the polite, curated one she offered to board members, but a quiet, sincere one that made Victor's pulse skip. "You're early," she said, walking toward them. "Figured you'd forgive us," Victor said. Maddie rushed forward and hugged Elise around the waist. "This place is huge." Elise crouched beside her. "Want to see the best part?" Maddie nodded with wide eyes. Elise led them around a curved glass wall to a smaller room filled with colorful furniture, bean bags, shelves of books, and a giant chalkboard covered in doodles. A woman in a cardigan greeted them from behind a low desk. This is the family lounge, Elise said. We use it for employee kids sometimes. I figured today it could be your office, CEO, Maddie gasped. There's a castle tent, Elise smiled, and snacks in the cabinet. You can stay here with Miss Dana while your dad and I talk. Victor knelt beside Maddie. You okay here for a little while? Maddie nodded enthusiastically before disappearing into the tent. Elise led Victor back into her office, where coffee steamed in 2 white mugs on a mid-century table near the window. She gestured for him to sit. He did, then glanced around. You really run all this. I do, she said, pouring sugar into her mug, but I'm thinking about changing it. Victor frowned. What do you mean? I've been offered a seat on a global ethics advisory board. It's mostly fieldwork, on-site development projects, actual cities. Actual people, he leaned forward. That's a big shift, she nodded. I'm tired of signing contracts that never touch the ground. I want something real. And this job, I'd pass it to someone I trust, she said. I've been grooming my COO for months. I didn't know why at the time, but now I do. Victor studied her. You ever think you're running from something? I used to, she said. Now I think I'm running toward something. He exhaled slowly. You're not asking me to follow, are you? No, Elise said. I'm asking you to stand beside me. He looked out the window. I've never left Texas, never been on a plane, never even owned a suitcase. She leaned in. Do you want to? He turned to face her. I want to be where you are. But I can't uproot Maddie's whole life unless I know it's a step forward, not a leap off a cliff. Elise nodded. Fair, that's why I've been quiet this week. I've been working on something. Actually, 2 things. She stood and walked to her desk, returning with a small envelope and a folder. She handed the envelope to him first. Victor opened it hesitantly. Inside was a photo of a modest single-story house with a wraparound porch and a yard full of wildflowers. Attached was a note. It's on the edge of town, Elise said, close to Maddie's school. Yours if you want it. His brows lifted. You bought a house. I bought us a home, she said softly. If you want it. He opened the folder next. Inside was a printed agreement with his name on it, an offer to lead a new community mechanical workshop funded by an educational grant through Saunders Tech. I had to fight the board, she said, watching his reaction. They wanted to turn it into a robotics program. I told them real people still drive real cars, and someone needs to teach the next generation how to fix them. Victor ran a hand over his jaw, eyes never leaving the page. You did this for me. I did this for us, she said. And because I believe in what you can build. He set the folder down and stood. You know I never asked for any of this. I know, she said, stepping closer. That's why you deserve it. He reached for her hand, pulling her in until there was barely space between them. I'm all in, he said. But I need to ask you something. Elise looked up at him. Anything. He dropped to one knee, her breath caught. Maddie already thinks you're a superhero. I think you're something even rarer, someone who sees not just the man I am, but the man I want to be. I don't have a ring yet. But I've got a promise. Elise blinked quickly, her hands trembling in his. I want a life with you, he said. Not just shared weekends or texts or holidays, a real life. Waking up beside you, raising Maddie together, building something that lasts. She knelt in front of him, eyes brimming. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. They kissed, not like people testing the water, but like 2 lives finally crashing into place. Later, when they picked Maddie up from the lounge and told her the news, she jumped up and down and demanded to be a flower girl, even if there aren't flowers. The wedding took place in the backyard of the house Elise bought. Maddie wore a crown of daisies and handed out lemonade to guests from a tiny cart. Victor wore a new shirt and boots polished within an inch of their life. Elise wore a dress that Maddie helped pick out, and no one cared who had more money or who came from where. They started their life not with a honeymoon in Europe or a private island, but with a Sunday morning pancake breakfast in their new kitchen while Maddie danced barefoot across the tiles. Victor kissed Elise's temple, sliding an arm around her waist. This, he said, is everything. Elise leaned into him, and we built it together. Victor stood barefoot on the back porch, his hand wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, watching the early morning light spill over the wildflower-dotted yard. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of water running inside. Elise was brushing her teeth. and Maddie was still tucked beneath her dinosaur print comforter, snoring softly the way she did when she'd stayed up too late reading. He took a long sip and exhaled, letting the warmth settle in his chest. In every way that mattered, they'd built something real here, the kind of life he never thought he'd have again. Behind him, the screen door creaked open. "I thought I'd find you out here," Elise said, wrapped in one of his flannel shirts that hung past her knees. "You always know," he said, reaching for her hand. She stepped onto the porch beside him, curling her fingers around his. "It's the way the floorboards creak. You always pause before the last step," he chuckled. "So I've got to tell only one," she said, leaning against his shoulder. "The rest of you is a mystery." Victor glanced down at her. "Still, especially now," she murmured. "You're softer in the mornings." He kissed the top of her head. "Mornings are easier now." They stood in silence for a few more seconds before Elise pulled away slightly and turned to face him. "I got a call last night from the board in Geneva." Victor raised an eyebrow. "They offered me the chair position on the ethics panel. It comes with travel." "A lot of it." He set his mug down on the railing. "What you tell them?" "I told them I'd take it on one condition." He tilted his head. "What's that?" "That I could base my work here and only travel when necessary. No more disappearing for weeks. No more pretending I don't have roots." "And they agreed," she nodded. "I'll be building the framework from here, and when I do travel, I'll bring you and Maddie if you want, but I'm not leaving this place or this life." Victor took a moment to absorb it, then grinned. "You really are rewriting all the rules." "I think I used to write the wrong ones," she said. "Now I want ones that start with Sunday pancakes and end with you reading bedtime stories in funny voices." He laughed. "You're still not over the cowboy accent, huh?" "It haunts me," she said, shaking her head. "But in a good way." The sound of a door opening behind them pulled their attention. Maddie shuffled onto the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her hair sticking out wildly to one side. "It's my turn to pick breakfast," she said, rubbing her eyes, "and I want waffles." Victor crouched and opened his arms. "Then waffles it is." She walked into his hug and rested her head on his shoulder. "I had a dream last night," Maddie said. "We were all in a hot air balloon and went to a place with pink sand and blue trees." "Sounds like we need to plan a vacation," Elise said, brushing Maddie's hair back. Victor stood, Maddie still in his arms, and smiled at Elise. "We've got the time now." That evening, while Maddie painted at the kitchen table, her new obsession was making greeting cards for every possible occasion. Victor and Elise sat at the counter, elbows touching. "You ever think about adding to our team?" Elise asked, her voice casual. Victor glanced over. "You mean like a puppy?" She gave him a look, his eyebrows rose. "You're serious?" She nodded. "I've been thinking about it for a while, not instead of what we have, but because of it. I want to grow this life with you, with Maddie, maybe with more." Victor was quiet. Then slowly, "You'd make an amazing mom again." "You already are," she replied gently. He reached across the counter and took her hand. "Then let's do it, together, however it looks." They didn't need to say more. The decision wasn't about filling a gap. It was about sharing the abundance of love they already had. 2 years later, the front yard was filled with folding chairs, neighbors, and the smell of slow-cooked ribs. Elise's mother's old record player sat near the porch, spinning a Nina Simone vinyl, and Maddie, now 8, was setting up a lemonade stand out of nostalgia, complete with hand-painted signs and a tip jar labeled "For Future Bakery." Victor carried a toddler on his hip, a curly-haired boy with a wide, curious gaze and a laugh that erupted every time his sister made faces at him. Elise was in the garden, barefoot in the grass, her sundress fluttering as she arranged fresh-cut flowers into mason jars. She turned and caught Victor watching her. He walked over, the little boy grabbing for a daisy as they passed. "You know, I still can't believe this is our life." "I can," she said, taking the jar from his hand. "Because we chose it every step." "Even the hard ones," Victor added. "Especially the hard ones," she agreed. They kissed soft, familiar, sure, no fireworks, no dramatic background music. Just lips against lips, years of trust folded into a single, quiet moment. Maddie shouted from the porch, "You guys, we're out of cups." Victor tilted his head. "Think we've got more in the pantry," Elise grinned. "Let's find out." As they walked back hand in hand, their son babbling between them and Maddie waving wildly from her stand, Elise looked up at the sky. "You know," she said, "I think this is what forever looks like." Victor pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then I'm glad I get to live it with you," and they did, every single day, together.